The grand arena of Allura was unlike any place in the galaxy. Situated on the edge of a massive nebula, its vast structure seemed to defy both logic and gravity. Towering spires of shimmering metal rose and ground, casting long shadows over the colossal battlefield. The air hummed with an energy that made the skin tingle, a mix of ancient rituals and cutting-edge technology. Spectators from across the stars had gathered, each representing a different race, all with one thing in common: an insatiable desire to witness the universal tournament. The stadium was filled with beings of unimaginable forms, floating translucent orbs of thought, towering creatures with scales like living mountains, beings made entirely of liquid plasma, shifting shapes in an ever-changing dance, and even sentient clouds, their laughter echoing across the arena as they exchanged telepathic jests. Above, holographic banners flashed with the faces of the most renowned fighters, their reputations spanning millennia. At the center of the arena, an ancient altar, untouched by time, stood at the ready, its stone surface carved with glyphs that pulsed with a life of their own. It was here, in this hallowed ground, that the greatest warriors of the galaxy would prove their might. For thousands of years, the tournament had been dominated by warriors of unparalleled skill, each representing the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the universe. Today, however, there was a newcomer, one who didn't belong. A human. The crowd's chatter shifted as the unknown contender, Ethan Hayes, stepped forward, his presence a stark contrast to the cosmic giants around him. He wasn't a towering figure or a being of mystical power. Instead, he wore the expression of someone who'd walked in the wrong party, casually tossing a sports bag over his shoulder. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Who was this human? What could he possibly bring to the ancient art combat? And yet, as the galaxy's finest prepared for the ultimate challenge, the galaxy itself would soon learn this underdog was more than a bargain for. This opening sets the stage for a dynamic and colorful universe, with diverse alien species, and an event of monumental importance. It also highlights the contrast between Ethan Hayes and the galaxy's elite, teasing the unconventional journey ahead. Ethan Hayes stood at the entrance to the galactic combat arena, taking a long look around. His eyes weren't filled with awe or fear, but with the unmistakable curiosity of someone who had no business being there, yet was perfectly content to be in the thick of it. The air hummed with the energy of thousands of spectators, and yet Ethan seemed unfazed. While competitors in the galaxy's elite factions, warlike reptilians, hyper-intelligent AI beings, and fierce energy manipulators, gathered, preparing with ancient rituals, advanced technology, and calculated focus, Ethan stood in the middle of the bustling preparation area, wearing a simple black hoodie, sweatpants, and a pair of beat-up sneakers. The contrast was glaring. He looked out of place. But there he was, sipping from a disposable coffee cup, completely relaxed, as if he were waiting for a local gym workout rather than facing off against the most formidable warriors in the galaxy. When a towering Crockian beast eyed him suspiciously, Ethan didn't flinch. He just grinned and nodded. "Hey, man, you get coffee around here, or what? I'm starting to get withdrawals." The Crockian-esque massive nostrils flared as it stared at the human. "Coffee?" it rumbled, as if the very concept was an affront to its existence. "Yeah, coffee. It's, kind of an earth thing. You know, keeps you awake. Like a power-up, but for humans." Ethan shrugged, adjusting the strap of his gym bag nonchalantly. "You wouldn't understand." Nearby, a Xylonian sage, draped in robes of interwoven light, looked down at Ethan with a mixture of contempt and confusion. "You must be the human. You know you have no chance against us, yes?" Ethan grinned again, undeterred. "I don't need a chance, buddy. I've got creativity. And if that doesn't work, I'll just wing it." The others in the preparation area exchanged glances. Ethan's unconventional confidence and casual demeanor were baffling, even amusing. Yet, there was something about his presence that felt dangerous, like an unpredictable element in a carefully balanced system. No one had expected this human to even qualify, let alone show up for the tournament like he was heading to a casual Sunday picnic. But Ethan Hayes wasn't there to play by the rules, or even follow the game. He was there to break it. This section emphasizes Ethan's contrast with the serious and highly skilled competitors. His quirky and relaxed personality highlights the underdog nature of his character, setting up intrigue by showing that his unpredictable style might be his greatest strength. The Universal Combat Tournament had seen countless champions rise and fall, but none were as legendary as Grandmaster Vorkin, the undefeated champion for the past 500 years. His reputation was forged through millennia of rigorous combat, his name synonymous with tradition, discipline, and precision. Vorkin's combat style, Tar, the ancient martial art of ether, was an embodiment of perfected technique, each movement a calculated expression of millennial-old wisdom. His victories were always clean, controlled, and devastating. In every match, he became the unmovable force, a living symbol of tradition and mastery. Now, as the tournament finals drew near, Vorkin stood at the apex of his career, overlooking the lineup of challengers. One by one, he reviewed their profiles. Alien combatants, AI-enhanced beings, ancient warlords, the best of the best. But his gaze lingered on one name, Ethan Hayes, a human who had somehow made it this far. A human. Vorkin's expression was one of measured disdain as he scrolled through Ethan's profile. The odds were laughable. A statistical impossibility. This human has no place here, Vorkin muttered to himself, shaking his head. The very thought of facing someone so untrained, so utterly outside the ancient system of combat was offensive. The tournament officials had made it clear Ethan was an anomaly, a wild card. There was no formal training in the galaxy that could prepare someone like him for the level of skill required. The human's methods were unpredictable at best, chaotic at worst. But the rules were the rules, and here he was, advancing far beyond anyone's expectations. As the crowd around him buzzed with speculation, Vorkin's mind was set on one thing: destroying the human's unearned reputation. The old ways would prevail, as they always had. The young, wild chaos of this human would be crushed beneath the weight of Vorkin's precision and tradition. Meanwhile, across the arena, Ethan leaned casually against a pillar, sipping his coffee, completely unaware of the cold, calculating eyes watching him. He had no delusions of grandeur. He didn't need to. He wasn't there to win on skill. He was there to win on ingenuity. The stakes were clear. Vorkin's dominance was threatened by an unpredictable, unrefined human who defied all expectations. And the galaxy was watching to see if tradition would break or if the human would be swallowed whole by the established order. This section introduces the main challenge and the antagonist, Vorkin, who embodies the old ways of tradition, skill, and control. By showing how Ethan is vastly outmatched in terms of technique, it builds tension and sets the stage for the inevitable clash between old and new. The odds are stacked heavily against Ethan, making the stakes high for his survival and success. Ethan Hayes stood in the center of the combat arena's training bay, surrounded by a dozen competitors who had begun their warm-up rituals. The Vether warriors were engaging in complex, fluid movements that flowed like an intricate dance. Their bodies shimmered with energy as they aligned their chakras, focusing on balance and power. A Kthali energy shifter hummed as it meditated, absorbing cosmic rays to enhance its combat potential. Even the Krokian beast was performing its own unique ritual, each thunderous step sending vibrations through the ground as it stomped around in a circle. Ethan, on the other hand, was sitting cross-legged on the floor, munching on a protein bar. He glanced up at the other competitors with a casual wave. "You guys got room for some stretches?" he asked with a grin, completely unfazed by the spectacle around him. A Xylonian sage, floating serenely nearby, looked down at him with its glowing eyes, silently judging his lack of discipline. Ethan gave the sage a thumbs up. "Gonna do some basic stretches, you know? Nothing too intense." He stood up, stretched out his arms, and began to limber up with a set of jumping jacks. The room paused. A few warriors exchanged confused glances. A plasma strider, its body crackling with electricity, shifted slightly, clearly unsure whether it was witnessing a new form of combat ritual or just absurdity. Ethan didn't notice. He kept up with his jacks, then seamlessly transitioned into burpees, though his form was less about precision and more about, well, getting through it. He grinned as he hit the floor for one last push-up. "All right," he panted. "I'm ready. Let's do this." Across the room, the Krokian beast tilted its massive head, confused. It had never seen a human warrior, let alone anyone in this tournament, prepare with such disregard for tradition? A tar master, known for his sharp reflexes and intricate rituals, muttered his fellow competitors. What is he doing? This is not even combat training. But as Ethan finished his routine, he turned to face the others with a shrug. Who needs all that fancy stuff? I'm just here to keep it simple. At that, a small group of crystalline beings nearby vibrated with what seemed to be laughter, their refractive surfaces catching the light in odd, angular bursts. They exchanged telepathic whispers that echoed across the room. Is this a joke or an unconventional challenge? Ethan merely flashed them a grin. Trust me, if it works for me, it'll work for you. With a relaxed sigh, he grabbed his coffee cup, looking every bit the overconfident underdog as the others resumed their more ritualistic routines. Ethan's preparation had defied every norm. Yet, in a way, it was exactly what he needed, because in a world of perfection, chaos could be just as powerful. In this scene, Ethan's quirky and unorthodox approach to preparation is in stark contrast to the traditional and highly disciplined methods of his competitors. The humor of a situation adds charm to his character, while showing how he defies the norms, keeping the atmosphere light and unpredictable. Just like his style of combat, the tournament was in full swing, and Ethan Hayes was already proving to be an enigma. His first match was against the Tarnaxian gladiator, a hulking figure with 4 arms and a mouth full of jagged teeth that vibrated in sync with its immense size. The Tarnaxian was known for its superhuman strength and brute force, capable of smashing through barriers with one punch. As the bell rang, the Tarnaxian charged forward, fists raised, each blow causing the air to crackle with energy. Ethan, however, was nowhere near ready for traditional combat. Instead of throwing punches or dodging with precision, he simply rolled to the side with a lackadaisical grunt, almost as if he'd misjudged the distance. The crowd gasped in confusion. Is he not fighting back? Whispered a Thali warrior, clearly unsure of the situation. The Tarnaxian roared, throwing one devastating punch after another. But each time, Ethan rolled away, narrowly avoiding the attacks while sipping from a flask of water. Finally, after a particularly close call, he pulled out his phone and raised it to the air. All right, he muttered, swiping through a few apps. Time for some entertainment. With a tap, the Tarnaxian's vision screen flickered. A small, blinking laser pointer appeared on the opponent's face. The Tarnaxian paused, eyes darting wildly at the tiny red, moving around its face. The crowd was in stunned silence, watching as the gladiator awkwardly tried to swipe at the, losing focus on his opponent completely. Meanwhile, Ethan continued to sip his water and look at the scoreboard, all while the audience burst into laughter. The Tarnaxian charged in one last time, desperate to catch the elusive red. But instead of landing a hit, it slammed into a force field, its body recoiling back into the arena. The referee, who had been in shock, raised his hands. Winner, Ethan Hayes. Ethan, with his phone still in hand, waved at the cheering crowd. Easy peasy, he said with a shrug, totally unfazed by the spectacle. The Tarnaxian gladiator, now thoroughly embarrassed, picked itself up and sulked off the field. Ethan's next match was against a gravinite shifter, a being that could manipulate gravity, turning the arena into a floating battlefield where even the smallest misstep could send you crashing into the walls. Most competitors relied on intense focus to control their movements in zero gravity. Ethan, however, had no such plans. The match began, and the gravinite shifter instantly elevated itself into the air, sending waves of gravity distortion toward Ethan. Most fighters were floated carefully and carefully adjusted their stance, but Ethan simply jumped as though gravity were just a suggestion. He flailed wildly, tumbling in the air like a child on a trampoline, his arms flapping comically as he tried to land. As he floated back down, his eyes narrowed in confusion. Wait, I think I'm supposed to... Oh, well... And with that, he landed with a perfect somersault, using the gravinite shifter's own gravity waves to bounce off its force field. Before the shifter could respond, Ethan darted forward, using his fists in an oddly effective combination of flailing and wild swings that somehow managed to land. The shifter was too disoriented by Ethan's lack of coordination to even react, and before long, the gravinite shifter crashed into the arena floor. Another flawless victory for the human, the crowd still unsure if they were watching a masterstroke or a bizarre fluke. In these matches, Ethan's unconventional methods, from rolling away from a hulking gladiator to using a laser pointer on a giant alien, create tension and highlight his unpredictability, while the humorous moments break the tension and show how Ethan is able to overcome powerful and skilled opponents using his unique style. The other competitors in the audience are left both perplexed and entertained, never knowing what this human will do next. Grandmaster Thraxer, leader of the Tarnaxian Order, paced back and forth in the meditation chamber, his 12 eyes flicking from one projection to the next. The holographic screens displayed Ethan Hayes' matches, each one more absurd than the last. Thraxer gripped the armrest of his throne, the bioluminescent tattoos on his body glowing with frustration. His hands were trembling slightly, but it wasn't from fear. This human, this untrained, unrefined human, was not only surviving but dominating the tournament in ways that defied everything Thraxer knew about combat. On the screen, Ethan was seen sliding on his back through an energy ring during his match with the Gravenite shifter, then using a wild elbow to knock the shifter out of the air. No discipline, Thraxer muttered under his breath. No technique. He clenched his fists, his claws digging into the fabric of his ceremonial robes. His mind was racing. This human's chaos was a direct affront to everything Thraxer stood for. For centuries, his Tarnaxian order had adhered to the sacred principles of combat: precision, control, and honor. They were the greatest warriors the galaxy had ever known. And yet, this human, this Ethan Hayes, was turning the rules of combat into an unpredictable farce. Thraxer's second-in-command, a towering Zarlian general, leaned in, speaking softly. "Master Thraxer, we've analyzed his technique. There's no strategy, no logic, only randomness. It's like fighting a force of nature." Thraxer's multiple eyes narrowed. A force of nature? His voice grew colder. This human is breaking the very fabric of combat tradition. He turned to the holographic display of Ethan's victory against the Tarnaxian gladiator. The gladiator, a colossal being revered across the galaxy for its sheer power, had fallen not due to brute force, but to humans' insubordination of tradition. Instead of meeting strength with strength, Ethan had used humor and distraction, a laser pointer. Thraxer's claws gripped tighter, his mind struggling to understand. In all his years, he had seen hundreds of warriors, but none like this. This human didn't fight by the rules. He didn't follow the path. And yet, with every battle, he came out victorious. It was as though Ethan had invented a new form of combat altogether, a form that was beyond the rigid structure Thraxer and his Tarnaxian order had spent centuries perfecting. "It's a mockery," Thraxer muttered, staring at the screen with an expression of disbelief. "A mockery of everything we stand for." And then it hit him. This wasn't just a human's lack of discipline or lack of skill that was enraging him. This was a threat to the entire galaxy's combat philosophy. If Ethan Hayes succeeded, if this chaotic, unpredictable style of fighting could defeat the best warriors in the galaxy, then it would rewrite combat itself. "He's not breaking the rules," Thraxer whispered to himself, his voice carrying a mix of rage and reluctant admiration. "He's breaking the game." In this scene, Thraxer's perspective shifts from disbelief to recognition of Ethan as a unique threat to the established order. His frustration grows as he watches Ethan's victories, realizing that Ethan's unorthodox approach is not just unusual, it's a game-changer that challenges the very foundation of combat tradition. Thraxer's growing understanding of this new threat deepens the conflict, setting up the ultimate confrontation. As Ethan Hayes made his way to the final round of the Galactic Combat Tournament, the air was thick with tension. The massive arena of Nexalin Prime, a gleaming megastructure suspended in the heart of a neutron star, roared with the chatter of spectators from across the galaxy. Yet, there was an unusual stillness as the tournament reached its climax. Betting markets flashed across the galaxy, but this time, the numbers weren't quite right. The usual odds and predictions glitched. Systems that usually calculated combat statistics with pinpoint accuracy suddenly displayed a cryptic message. "Error. Does not compute." Whispers rippled through the crowd. The Vargothian traders, usually dead set on their winnings, stared in confusion at their holoscreens. Even Raxinox, a notoriously cynical betmaster from the Solarian cluster, found himself scratching his 3 chins. "How does a human with no technique," he murmured, "make it this far?" The tension was palpable. Ethan, an untrained, chaotic human, had somehow defied every single expectation, and now he stood on the edge of galactic history. In the VIP box, the Tarnaxian Order watched with growing unease. Grandmaster Thraxer's eyes flicked from the competitor profile to the holographic display, his gaze narrowing. Ethan had defeated some of the finest warriors in the galaxy, the Xynar, the Gravenites, and the terrifying Ion Warlocks, all without following a single established rule. His randomness, his complete lack of respect for tradition, had left opponents scrambling to adapt. "I thought this was a combat tournament, not a circus," a Zygosian noble sneered. "That human doesn't even fight. He just plays tricks." Across the arena, spectators from every corner of the galaxy were puzzled. Some were enraged, calling for the tournament to be declared invalid, while others were captivated, their eyes glued to the chaotic unpredictability of it all. How could a human with no skill, one who didn't follow the established combat traditions, have made it this far? As Ethan stepped into the arena for his final match, his completely unorthodox warm-up, stretching by doing random dance moves, was met with laughter mixed with incredulity. His opponent, a Vrexian warlord, a living weapon with over 500 confirmed victories, loomed across from him, with massive biceps and towering over 8 feet. The warlord seemed like a walking storm of brute force. Yet, in the stands, a curious murmur swept through the crowd. There was excitement building, not for the warlord's inevitable victory, but because of one thing: the mystery of this human. His methods, though unconventional, had been effective, and in the face of the galaxy's greatest combatants, they might just change the game. The final round had begun. Betting markets now show 1% for the human, the announcer said, his voice trembling as he delivered the statistics. This has never happened in tournament history. As Ethan locked eyes with his opponent, a bold smirk spread across his face. "Ready to lose to human chaos?" he called out, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The crowd fell silent. Ethan Hayes, the underdog, the wild card, was about to face his most formidable opponent yet. And for the first time in galactic history, it wasn't just about strength or skill. It was about the unpredictable, unconventional power of a single human. The stakes had never been higher. In this scene, suspense builds as Ethan Hayes advances to the final, with all eyes on him, spectators, competitors, and officials alike. His unorthodox style defies traditional combat norms, leaving the galaxy in disbelief. This sets the stage for the final, raising the stakes by emphasizing how his methods challenge the very foundations of the galaxy's combat systems. The final round had arrived. The arena, a towering coliseum of shimmering plasma and shattered asteroids, hummed with anticipation. This was the moment that would determine the future of intergalactic combat. At the center stood Ethan Hayes, the underdog, wearing nothing but a grin in his now familiar mismatched training gear. Across from him was Zaravoth, the unyielding, a terrifying force of nature, a living embodiment of precision and tradition. He was a Vrexian warlord, known throughout the galaxy for his exacting control, limitless strength, and flawless combat technique. His movements were honed by thousands of years of training, passed down through generations. Zaravoth was, quite simply, the perfect warrior. The tension in the arena was palpable. The crowd, held in awe by Zaravoth's reputation, expected an easy victory. But Ethan's unorthodox methods had confounded the galaxy for weeks. As the bell rang to signal the start, Zaravoth made the first move. In an instant, he was a blur of motion, his massive fist, a hammer of unstoppable force, shot towards Ethan's chest. But Ethan was already gone. With a somersault, he dodged the attack and landed in a perfectly ridiculous dance pose. "Not today, big guy," Ethan quipped, his voice loud and clear, echoing across the arena. Zaravoth's mighty fist cracked the floor with such force that the arena trembled. The warlord was used to crushing his enemies with speed and strength. He gave no ground. "You mock me, human," he growled, his eyes flashing with rage. Ethan, completely unfazed, rolled his shoulders, stretched his arms, and said, "Mock you? Nah, I'm just trying to stay limber for the win. Then he pulled out something that sent a ripple of confusion through the crowd. A rubber chicken. The warlord stared in utter disbelief as Ethan waved the chicken in the air like a flag of war. For a moment, even the galactic officials couldn't understand what was happening. Then, in a sudden burst of unpredictable action, Ethan charged. Instead of rushing in with a combination of punches, he flung the rubber chicken directly at Zarevotha's face. The chicken bounced off the warlord's helmet with a comical boink. Seriously? Zarevoth muttered, anger boiling over. The warlord surged forward, tried to land a crushing blow, but Ethan was already sliding beneath him, executing an absurdly elaborate floor routine, complete with mock ribbon twirl. The crowd gasped, then burst into laughter, but the tension hadn't lifted. Zarevoth was fuming, and his next move was a deadly spin attack, spinning at incredible speeds with blades extending from his forearms, creating a lethal whirlwind. Ethan, still smiling, dodged effortlessly, doing a cartwheel then a backflip, landing with a dramatic flourish. "I hope you like surprises, buddy," he said, his eyes gleaming with mischievous delight. The warlord, though infuriated, was no fool. His battle instincts were honed over centuries, and had studied the tactics of every opponent he'd ever faced. As he prepared for his final, decisive move, he summoned his weapon, a glowing energy lance, known across the galaxy for its unmatched cutting power. Ethan's expression shifted for the first time. His playful demeanor faded as he narrowed his eyes at the weapon. For the first time in the entire tournament, the chaotic human seemed focused. He sprinted forward and, in one fluid motion, grabbed the nearest object, a trash bin lid. He spun it like a frisbee, launching it directly at the warlord's energy lance. The two objects collided with shattering crack, sending a shockwave across the arena. The warlord stumbled backward, thrown off balance. Ethan, seizing the opportunity, grabbed the energy lance and wrenched it out of Zarevotha's hands with a quick, precise twist. The crowd went silent. Was it possible? Had the untrained human actually managed to disarm the great warlord? "Surprise," Ethan said, flipping the weapon in his hands like it was no big deal. Then, with one final flick, he fired the lance's energy output into ground beneath Zarevoth, creating a blinding explosion. When the dust cleared, Zarevoth was on the ground, dazed but still alive. The arena was in utter silence, until Ethan casually strolled over, extending a hand. "Good fight, man," he said with a smile. The crowd erupted into thunderous applause, not because of the traditional battle prowess shown, but because they had just witnessed the impossible. A human had outplayed the greatest warrior in the galaxy, not through sheer strength, but through sheer unpredictability. As Zarevoth lay on the ground, stunned, he finally spoke, his voice low but sincere. "You broke the game, human." Ethan leaned down and offered a final piece of advice. "Yeah, sometimes it's all about thinking outside the box." In this final showdown, the contrast between tradition versus chaos and precision versus adaptability is on full display. Ethan's unpredictable humor and absurd tactics clash with Zarevotha's disciplined, traditional combat style. Moments of humor keep the atmosphere lively while adding unexpected twists, making this final battle a true test of unconventional thinking. As the dust settled over the arena, the weight of what had just occurred began to sink in. Ethan Hayes, now the reigning champion, stood alone in the center, breathing heavily but grinning from ear to ear. His victory was a statement that would echo throughout the galaxy. The spectators, once doubtful, were now on their feet, cheering for the human who defied every expectation. The officials exchanged glances, unsure of what to make of the results. The betting odds, which had pegged Ethan as an impossible underdog, were now obsolete. Humanity had not only survived, but had shattered the rules of the game. Zarevoth, still lying on the ground, slowly pushed himself up. His face, usually a mask of stoic discipline, was now a mixture of awe and deep reflection. "You've broken the game, human," he muttered, his voice tinged with respect. Ethan approached the fallen warrior, extending a hand to help him up. "Yeah, I guess I have," he said with a grin, "but maybe that's the point. Sometimes the rules just need a little shake-up." Zarevoth took the hand, pulling himself up, The warlord's eyes locked with Ethan's. In all my years of combat, I've never encountered someone who could rewrite the rules like you. Ethan shrugged, a look of genuine thoughtfulness crossing his face. I don't think I rewrote anything. I just saw it differently. I didn't try to fit into the old ways. I made my own way, and I think that's how change happens. As the crowd's cheers grew louder, Ethan took a deep breath and looked around the arena. A few weeks ago, he was just a guy from Earth, the most unlikely of champions. Now, he had inspired an entire galaxy to rethink what was possible. His victory wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a shift in perspective, a reminder that tradition wasn't the only way to succeed. His eyes lingered on the Grand Colosseum, its towering spires and floating platforms now filled with beings from countless civilizations. In the distance, beyond the cheering, he could see other humans watching from Earth, no doubt wondering what it had done to make such an impact. Do you think they'll start changing the rules across the galaxy now? Ethan asked, his voice more thoughtful than before. Zarevov let out a quiet chuckle. I believe you've given them no choice. Ethan smiled and nodded. Well, that's good to know. Maybe next time I'll win by doing a backflip off the edge of the arena. Who knows? As the crowd roared with laughter, Ethan stood tall, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment not just from the victory itself, but from the disruption it caused. The galaxy would never be the same. And as for Ethan, he was already thinking about his next challenge, whatever it may be. In this resolution, the implications of Ethan's victory are clear. Unconventional thinking has disrupted the status quo and shown the galaxy that the old ways of doing things are not the only path to greatness. The reflective moment emphasizes the idea that rules are not limitations, but opportunities for innovation and evolution. Ethan's victory has set a precedent that will resonate far beyond the arena, sparking change across the galaxy. As the final cheers echoed through the arena, Ethan's communicator buzzed with a simple message. Earth is calling. Prepare for the next mission. He glanced at Zarevov, who was still deep in thought, watching the human who had changed everything. Guess they're ready for me to take on something else, Ethan said, his tone light, but with a spark of excitement. Zarevov raised an eyebrow. What now? Have you conquered the galaxy already? Ethan shrugged, a cocky grin forming on his face. Not quite, but this galaxy's got a whole lot more to offer, and I'm just getting started. Far from being a one-time fluke, Ethan's victory had sparked something much bigger. Across the galaxy, other beings were already taking notice, questioning their own rigid traditions, wondering if perhaps a new era was on the horizon, an era where humanity led the charge. As the camera zoomed out, showing a vast galaxy in motion, Ethan sent a single message to Earth. Mission accomplished. Now, send me the next one. In the distance, a new set of challenges awaited, and the galaxy wasn't quite prepared for what humanity might unleash next. This teaser leaves the audience excited for what's to come, suggesting that Ethan's victory isn't just a personal achievement, but the beginning of a larger shift in the galaxy. His journey is far from over, and the implications of his actions will resonate across worlds, setting the stage for future adventures. The closing line hints at greater challenges ahead, while keeping the tone light and anticipatory.